It started small, the kind of changes that could easily be brushed off as the quirks of a busy life. My wife, Alina, 32, had always been an early riser, devoted to her routine. Yoga in the morning, work as an interior designer during the day, and unwinding at home with me, her husband, Dan, 35. We live in Denver, in a cozy two-bedroom apartment overlooking the city skyline. We've been married for 7 years, solid years, or so I thought. But lately, her mornings had started earlier. She'd be out of the apartment by 6 a.m., heading to her gym across town. At first, it seemed normal. Alina had always been into fitness, but this new routine felt obsessive. She was coming home later than usual too, flushed, her hair pulled into a tight bun, carrying a duffel bag that looked heavier than it should. Long workout? I asked one evening when she walked in. She shot me a quick smile. Yeah, I stayed for a spin class after. That was fine, except I noticed she didn't look sweaty. Her makeup intact, hair too neat. I didn't push it. Maybe I didn't want to believe what my gut was whispering. The suspicions really took root when I decided to surprise her. It was a Wednesday. My afternoon job canceled last minute. I showed up at the gym around 4:30 p.m., hoping to maybe catch her mid-session, or at least say hi. I checked in with the receptionist, a young guy with messy blonde hair and a clipboard. "Excuse me," I said. "Is Alina here? Alina Morrison?" He scanned his log, his pin hovering. She's not checked in right now. Maybe she was here earlier?" My stomach tightened. I walked back out to the parking lot and sat in my car, waiting, scanning the gym's entrance like a hawk. It was nearly 6 p.m. when I saw her walking out, laughing with someone. He was tall, lean, maybe early 40s, with an easy confidence and a towel slung over his shoulder. That's when it clicked. Her trainer, Jake. I'd seen him once before when I picked her up months ago. Alina had introduced him casually, brushing him off as just a trainer. But the way she smiled at him now wasn't casual. It lingered. His hand brushed her arm as they parted, and she climbed into her car, not even noticing my SUV parked just a few feet away. I followed her home, not in a creepy way, or so I told myself, but something about the way she carried herself, light, carefree, it made my chest tighten. She parked, went inside, and when I followed, I found her in the kitchen, humming to herself, unpacking groceries. "Hey," she greeted me, all warm and normal, too normal. "Gym good?" I asked, leaning on the counter. "Great. We had a killer leg day," she said, not missing a beat. "Leg day? Sure." I didn't say anything then, but that night, lying in bed, I scrolled through her Instagram. Nothing suspicious. She was too smart for that. But Jake's profile? It was public. There were group shots of him and his clients, nothing incriminating. But in one picture, a candid shot of a gym event, I saw her in the background, laughing, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The doubts gnawed at me. What if this wasn't just a workout buddy? What if this was something more? I decided I needed proof. The next morning, I woke up before Alina. She was already slipping out of bed, tying her hair into a ponytail. Her gym bag sat by the door, meticulously packed as always. "Heading out early again?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Yeah, Jake's doing a strength workshop this morning," she replied without looking at me. "You should come sometime." The invitation felt hollow, and she knew it. I wasn't much of a gym guy. She liked it that way. As she left, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. The gym had a client portal where members could view their schedules, classes, and trainer sessions. Alina had once logged in on this very laptop, and the autofill on the website remembered her email. It took a few tries, but I guessed her password, our anniversary date. Ironic, really. Once inside, I pulled up her schedule. She had sessions with Jake 4 times a week, but what caught my eye were the entries marked off-site consultation. 2 of them, over the last month, coincided with nights she claimed to be running errands or catching up with friends. Suspicious, but not enough. I needed more. That evening, I casually brought it up as we had dinner. A pasta dish she had prepared with surprising enthusiasm. "So, how's the training with Jake? You seem to be spending a lot of time there." Alina didn't even flinch. "It's great. He's been pushing me to try new things, you know? I feel so much stronger." "I can tell," I said with a slight smile, though my words carried an edge I hoped she didn't notice. "Oh, and he's been great about recommending stuff outside the gym too," she added, too quickly. like meal plans and stretching routines. Super professional. Professional. Sure. I nodded, but my mind was racing. The next day, I skipped work and drove to the gym parking lot. It was Friday, one of her off-site consultation days. I parked where I could see the entrance but remain hidden. Around 11 a.m., her car pulled in. She walked inside, and I followed after a few minutes, pretending to browse the gym's brochure. Through the glass walls of the training room, I saw her with Jake. He was guiding her through a deadlift, his hands positioned just inches from her waist. It could have been innocent, probably was, but the way she leaned into his instructions, her smile when he complimented her form, made my stomach churn. After about an hour, they wrapped up. I slipped back into my car, waiting. To my surprise, they didn't leave separately. Instead, they climbed into Jake's sleek black Audi. Together, I followed at a safe distance as they weaved through downtown traffic. My heart pounded as they pulled into the parking garage of an upscale boutique hotel. Alina stepped out of the car first, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, her face alight with a look I hadn't seen in months. Jake followed close behind, a hand lightly brushing her lower back as they disappeared through the lobby doors. For a long moment, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every fiber of my being wanted to storm into that hotel, confront them, demand answers. But I held back. Not yet. I needed undeniable proof. Something she couldn't lie her way out of. Something I could use when the time came. That night, as Alina came home late, she breezed past me in the living room with the same cheery, effortless smile. "How was your day?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. "Good. Long workout. Then I ran some errands." She kissed me on the cheek, the same kiss I'd gotten for years, now feeling as hollow as a ghost. I stared at her as she disappeared down the hallway, my resolve hardening. If there was any doubt left, it was gone now. The following Monday, I decided to escalate. I called my old friend Max, a tech-savvy guy who owed me a favor. Max had helped me set up our home Wi-Fi and once bragged about how he could hack into almost anything. I explained the situation in careful detail, though it still felt surreal to say the words out loud. "So, you're telling me you think Alina is stepping out with her trainer?" Max asked, his voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and excitement. "I don't think, Max. I know. I just need proof. Solid proof." He let out a low whistle. "Man, I don't condone this kind of thing, but I also can't resist a good mystery. What do you need? Can you get into her phone? Texts, GPS, the works?" There was a pause. "It's doable. Do you know her iCloud info? If it's synced, I can access everything." Another password guess later, her maiden name this time. I had the credentials. Max got to work while I paced around the apartment, every minute stretching longer than it should. By the end of the day, he called back with results. "All right, Dan, buckle up. I found some interesting stuff. Most of her texts are pretty clean. She's not dumb. But the location history on her phone is another story. She's been at that hotel you mentioned 3 times in the last 2 weeks." My throat tightened. "What about calls?" "A few to Jake's number. Short. Nothing suspicious if you didn't know what you were looking for." "Oh, and there's one thing you'll want to see for yourself. Check your email." I opened my laptop, fingers trembling, and clicked the attachment Max had sent. It was a screenshot, a calendar entry from her phone. "Lunch with Jay Redhart," read the title, scheduled for Wednesday at noon. Wednesday came, and so did another errand day for Alina. I pretended to leave for work, circling back to park near our building. Sure enough, by 11:30, she was out the door, dressed sharply but casually. Jeans that hugged her perfectly and a soft pink blouse that I knew wasn't for me. I followed her car to the restaurant, an upscale French bistro on the edge of downtown. She parked, went inside, and minutes later, Jake arrived, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and chinos. They hugged, lingering a bit too long for comfort, before taking a table near the window. I stayed in my car, my camera phone poised to capture every move. They talked animatedly, leaning in close, laughing. At one point, Jake reached across the table and brushed a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so intimate it made my blood boil. Then, the clincher. As they stood to leave, Jake pulled her into a tight embrace. His hand slipped briefly down to her lower back, lower than it should have been, and I snapped the photo. That evening, I printed the photo and placed it in an envelope, sliding it into my desk drawer. When Alina came home, she was glowing, more animated than she'd been with me in weeks. "Busy day," she chirped as she kicked off her shoes. "How about you?" "Same old," I replied, barely looking up from the TV. She sat beside me, her hand lightly brushing mine, but it felt like a stranger's touch. Inside, I seethed, but I held it together. The confrontation would come, but not tonight. I wanted the perfect moment, when she wouldn't have a single escape route. Instead, I smiled back at her and asked, "How about we grab dinner tomorrow? Just the two of us?" Her hesitation was brief, but it was there. "Oh, tomorrow? I might have to work late. Can we do Friday?" "Sure," I said smoothly, masking the anger boiling beneath. Friday sounds great, but Friday wasn't my plan. I already knew where she'd be tomorrow night, and who she'd be with. Thursday night arrived, and so did my reckoning. I'd spent the day meticulously planning every detail, running through the confrontation in my head over and over. This wouldn't be a screaming match or some messy public spectacle. I wanted answers, and I wanted them on my terms. Alina left for the gym around 5:30 p.m., her routine as predictable as clockwork. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing the envelope with the photo, my car keys, and a recorder I'd borrowed from Max tonight. I'd catch her in the act. Her gym was about 20 minutes away, a sleek, glass-walled building surrounded by a quiet strip mall. I parked 2 spots away from her car and waited. The evening sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lot. At 6:15 p.m., Jake emerged, dressed casually in jeans and a fitted polo. He didn't go inside. Instead, he leaned against his car, checking his phone, like he was waiting for someone. That someone was Alina. She walked out 5 minutes later, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, her face lighting up when she saw him. He opened the passenger door of his car, and she climbed in without hesitation. I tailed them as they drove to the same boutique hotel I'd seen before. My heart raced as they pulled into the garage, parked, and disappeared through the lobby doors. This time, I wasn't content to stay in my car. I needed proof that left no room for denial. Inside the hotel, I approached the front desk. A young woman with a tight bun and a bright smile greeted me. "Welcome. How can I help you?" Feigning calm, I leaned in and whispered conspiratorially, "I think I left something in room 412 earlier. My wife checked in under her name, Alina Morrison, but I can't seem to reach her. Can I grab a spare key?" The receptionist hesitated, glancing at her computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out keys without ID." I slid a $50 bill across the counter. "I promise I'll be quick." Her eyes darted around before she pocketed the cash and handed me a key card. "Make it fast." Room 412 was on the 4th floor, far down a quiet, carpeted hallway. My footsteps felt unnaturally loud as I approached the door. I slid the key card in, and the lock clicked open. I didn't burst in. No, I wanted to see everything unfold before they saw me. The chain latch was hooked from the inside, but the gap in the door was enough. Through the narrow slit, I saw them. Alina sitting on the edge of the bed, her head tilted back as Jake leaned over her, his hand caressing her cheek. Their laughter was soft but unmistakable, the kind that spoke of a private world I wasn't a part of. I hit record on the device in my pocket, capturing every damning second. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow, but I stayed silent, watching, documenting. It wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity, a cold certainty that this moment would change everything. After about a minute, I pulled back, my hand trembling as I unlatched the chain and flung the door open. The look on their faces was priceless. Alina's eyes widened in shock, her hands instinctively pulling her shirt down to cover herself. Jake froze, his confident smirk melting into a mask of sheer panic. "Don't stop on my account," I said, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. I tossed the photo onto the bed. "Thought you'd like a keepsake." "Dan," Alina stammered, standing abruptly. "What are you doing here?" "I think the better question," I said, my voice calm but firm, "is what are you doing here? With him?" Jake raised his hands defensively. "Hey man, I think we should all just—" "Shut up," I snapped, my gaze never leaving Alina. "This has nothing to do with you." Yet, Alina started to speak, her voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't." I held up a hand, silencing her. You don't get to insult my intelligence. I followed you. I saw the lunches, the hotel meetups, everything. You lied to my face, over and over. Tears welled in her eyes, but they only fueled my anger. Dan, please, let's talk about this. Oh, we'll talk, I said, my voice icy. But not here. Pack your things. You're not coming home tonight. Dan, wait. No. My voice echoed through the room. You threw away everything we built for this. For him. I deserve better, Alina, and I'm done being the fool. She stood there, stunned, as I turned on my heel and left the room. My heart pounded as I walked back to my car, each step feeling heavier than the last. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't in the dark anymore. I knew exactly what had to happen next. When Ava and Liam were born 13 years ago, I decided to start saving for their college education right away. I opened 2 investment accounts, one for each of them, and began contributing $200 per month to each account. It wasn't a huge amount, but I knew that steady, consistent savings would grow over time. Every month, $400 total went into those accounts, and I invested the money in a mix of stocks and bonds to keep it balanced. Over the years, those contributions started to build up. On top of the money I put in, the investments earned returns averaging about 7% per year. That growth was reinvested back into the accounts, helping the money grow even faster. Now, 13 years later, each of their accounts has grown to approximately $50,600. Together, they have about $101,200 saved for college. It's a significant amount, enough to cover a big chunk of their education, no matter where they decide to go. I felt a sense of accomplishment thinking about that. Every month, every small investment had added up to something meaningful for their future. But at the same time, it made everything happening in our lives feel even heavier. How could I explain all this to them? The sacrifices, the plans for their future, and what their mother's choices were threatening to take away. It was late when Alina came home that night, her footsteps hesitant as she stepped into the living room. I was sitting on the couch, the room dimly lit by the glow of the muted TV. I didn't look up right away. I wanted her to make the first move. She hesitated at the doorway, clutching her gym bag like it was some kind of shield. Dan, she started, her voice soft, almost trembling. Can we talk? I didn't answer immediately, just motioned toward the chair across from me. She sat down, her movements slow and deliberate. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the television. Then she spoke. I've made mistakes, she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. Big ones. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, feeling the weight of them. You don't deserve it, I said evenly, my tone devoid of emotion. You lied to me, Alina. For months. You destroyed our trust. Tears welled up in her eyes. I know I did. And I hate myself for it. But I don't want to lose you, Dan. I don't want to lose this family. I couldn't help but scoff at that. Now you're worried about the family? Where was that concern when you were sneaking off to hotels? When you were lying to my face, night after night? I was stupid, she said, her voice breaking. I got caught up in something I didn't understand. Jake, he doesn't matter. It didn't mean anything. You mean everything to me. Please, Dan, believe me. I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly together. Do you even hear yourself? It didn't mean anything? You risked our marriage, our kids' future, for something that didn't mean anything? She broke down then, tears streaming down her face as she covered her mouth with her hand. I was lonely, she choked out. You've been so busy, so distant. I felt invisible. And Jake, he made me feel. She stopped herself, shaking her head as if ashamed of her own words. So it's my fault now? I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I was working. I was building a life for us, for Ava and Liam. I was doing everything I could to keep us secure. And you were off finding someone else to fill the gaps? No, she said quickly. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming me. I made the choice, and it was wrong. But please, Dan, don't throw away everything we've built because of my stupidity. I'll do anything to fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I stood up then, pacing the room. My mind was racing. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that she could change, that we could somehow rebuild what she'd torn apart. But another part of me, the part that had seen her in that hotel room, laughing with him like I didn't exist, was screaming at me to stand my ground. What about the kids? I asked finally, turning to face her. Do you realize what this could do to them? Have you even thought about how they'll feel when they find out? Her sobs quieted, and she nodded, her hands trembling. They don't have to know, she said. We can keep this between us. Please, Dan. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. I stared at her, trying to see the woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew. But all I could see was the betrayal, the lies. Still, a part of me, a small, stubborn part, wanted to believe her. For the sake of the kids. For the sake of the life we'd built. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice cold. Not now. Maybe not ever. She flinched at my words, her tears falling silently now. I'll wait, she whispered, as long as it takes. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned away, walking upstairs to the spare room where I'd been sleeping. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me, suffocating me. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? For now, all I knew was that forgiveness, if it came, would take time, and it would come on my terms. The next morning, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney, a woman named Christine Mallory. Her office was downtown, a sleek space with walls lined with law books and framed diplomas. She looked to be in her early 50s, her graying hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, her tailored suit as sharp as her gaze. I sat across from her desk, clutching the envelope containing the photo I'd taken of Alina and Jake at the hotel. Christine leaned forward, a pen poised over her yellow legal pad. So, Mr. Morrison, she began, her voice calm but firm, tell me everything. I recounted it all, the gym sessions, the lunches, the hotel, and Alina's tearful plea for forgiveness the night before. As I spoke, Christine scribbled notes, occasionally nodding or asking for clarification. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. This is a challenging situation, she said. But let me ask you this. What do you want out of this? Are you looking for a divorce? A legal separation? Or are you considering reconciliation? I hesitated, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair. I don't know yet, I admitted. I'm furious, and I don't know if I can trust her again. But we have kids. They've been through enough. I don't want to destroy their lives. Christine nodded, her expression softening slightly. That's understandable. Let's discuss your options. First, if you do decide to pursue divorce, we'll need to gather as much evidence as possible to support your case, particularly if infidelity becomes a factor in custody or asset division. You've already taken a good first step with this photo. She gestured to the envelope, but I couldn't help feeling a pang of regret for having to rely on such proof. What about the kids? I asked. How does custody work in a case like this? In Colorado, custody decisions are based on the best interests of the child, Christine explained. Infidelity doesn't typically weigh heavily unless it can be shown that it directly impacted the children's well-being. For example, if your wife's actions put them at risk or interfered with their care, that could be relevant. She's been a good mother, I said reluctantly, but she's been distracted, and I've been the one consistently saving for their future, planning for college. I want to make sure that money goes to the kids, no matter what happens. Christine made another note. That's a smart priority. We can structure the division of assets to protect those funds, especially if they're in accounts designated specifically for the children's education. You'll also want to consider whether you'd like to seek joint custody or sole custody. I nodded, though the idea of my kids splitting their time between two homes twisted my stomach. And what about the house? The house will be part of the asset division, she said. You could request to keep it if it's feasible for you to maintain the mortgage on your own, or you could sell it and split the proceeds. Your wife might push to keep it as the primary residence for the kids, but that's negotiable. What if I decide not to divorce? I asked, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Christine leaned forward. If reconciliation is your goal, I'd still advise you to put protections in place. Consider a post-nuptial agreement. It can outline financial arrangements and expectations for behavior going forward, giving you some security should things deteriorate again. She paused, studying me. This is a deeply personal decision, Mr. Morrison. My job is to make sure you understand your rights and your options. Whether you divorce or try to rebuild, You need to approach this from a position of strength. I left the office with a folder of legal information and a growing sense of clarity. Divorce wasn't just a decision. It was a process, one that would ripple through every part of our lives. For the first time, I felt like I had control, or at least a path forward. As I drove home, Christine's words echoed in my mind. A position of strength. If Alina wanted a second chance, she'd have to earn it. And this time, the terms would be mine. That evening, I returned home with a weight on my shoulders, but a clearer sense of what I needed to do. Alina was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup on the stove, trying to look as though everything was normal. Her attempts at casual domesticity felt almost insulting. I'd seen through her lies, sat with a lawyer, and now I had to decide how to handle the storm she brought into our lives. She turned when she heard me come in, her smile timid, her eyes filled with hesitation. "Hey," she said softly, "dinner will be ready in a few minutes." I didn't respond right away, just hung my coat on the rack and dropped the folder from Christine onto the counter. Alina's eyes flicked to it, her expression tightening. "We need to talk," I said. She nodded, turning off the burner and wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Okay." We sat across from each other at the dining table, the tension between us palpable. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence broken only by the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. "I met with a lawyer today," I began, watching her carefully. Her face paled, and her hands gripped the edge of the table. You went to a lawyer?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I needed to know my options," I said flatly. "I needed to know what happens to the kids, the house, our finances. If this marriage ends." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "Dan, please." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't start crying. You did this, Alina. You made this mess, and now you're going to sit there and listen." She nodded, swallowing hard, her tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "I've been thinking about this all day," I continued, "about what you've done to me, to us, to our kids. And the truth is, I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I even want to try." Her sobs grew louder, but I pressed on. "That said, I owe it to Ava and Liam to think this through. I owe it to them to try to make the best decision for their future. But if I agree to try, if I have conditions." Alina sat up straighter, wiping her face. "Anything," she said. "I'll do anything." "First, we're going to counseling," I said. "Together and separately. And you're paying for it. You're going to unpack whatever made you think this was okay, and you're going to do the work to fix it." She nodded quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course." "Second," I continued, "we're getting a post-nuptial agreement. It will spell out exactly what happens if you pull this crap again. You lose everything, Alina. The house, the accounts, custody. I'm not putting myself or the kids through this twice." She hesitated for a split second, then nodded again. "Okay." "Third, and most important," I said, leaning forward, my voice sharp, "you're cutting all contact with Jake. I don't care if it's awkward at the gym. I don't care if it ruins your routine. You're done with him. You'll find a new trainer. Or better yet, you'll work out on your own. But if I see his name on your phone, if I hear his name out of your mouth, it's over." Immediately, her head bobbed, her voice barely audible. "I understand." I stared at her for a long moment, searching for any sign of resistance, any indication that she wasn't taking this seriously. "I'll think about it," I said finally, standing up. "But don't take this as forgiveness. You've broken something, Alina, and it's going to take a lot more than tears and promises to fix it." As I walked out of the room, I heard her collapse into sobs behind me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next few months were a careful balancing act, one that felt more like walking on a tightrope over a pit of resentment and mistrust. Alina threw herself into counseling, attending every session religiously. She seemed remorseful, doing everything she could to prove she was committed to making things work. The kids, Ava and Liam, were still largely unaware of the depth of what had happened, but the tension between Alina and me bled into their lives in subtle ways. At first, I thought things were improving. We even started having family dinners again, and Alina made an effort to be more affectionate. But something still felt off. It was a Wednesday evening, a few months after our confrontation. I was working late in my home office when Alina left her phone on the kitchen counter. A text notification popped up. Normally, I wouldn't have looked twice, but the name caught my eye. Jake. I froze, my heart hammering. The message preview read, "Thanks for the advice earlier." I needed that. For a moment, I told myself it could be innocent. Maybe they'd bumped into each other by chance. Maybe she was just being polite. But deep down, I knew better. The envelope of doubt I'd buried months ago ripped wide open. I picked up the phone, scrolling through her texts. Most of their conversations were brief, but they weren't the kind of messages that belonged in a professional or platonic relationship. Phrases like, "You always know what to say," and "let's keep this between us," jumped out like red flags. She was lying to me again. And worse, she thought she could get away with it. As I sat there, seething, the pieces began falling into place. I'd noticed small changes in Ava and Liam over the past few months, but I hadn't connected them to Alina until now. Ava had started giving me attitude, rolling her eyes whenever I asked her to do something. Liam, who had always been my little shadow, had grown distant, retreating to his room instead of helping me with projects like he used to. And then there were the comments. Subtle, but cutting. "Mom says you're always so serious, Dad. Why can't you lighten up? Mom told us you didn't want to go on that trip last year. Why didn't you?" At first, I thought it was normal teenage rebellion. But now, with the texts fresh in my mind, I realized Alina had been planting these seeds, quietly turning them against me, making me the bad guy in our family dynamic. 2 weeks later, I came home from work earlier than usual. Alina wasn't expecting me, and I found her in the living room with her phone in hand, texting rapidly. When she saw me, she jumped, her face flushing. "Who are you texting?" I asked, keeping my tone calm but firm. "No one," she said quickly, locking her phone and setting it on the couch beside her. "Just a friend." "Jake?" I asked pointedly, watching as her face paled. "Dan, it's not what you think." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't insult me, Alina. I saw the texts. You promised me you were done with him." She started to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. "You've been setting the kids against me, haven't you?" I demanded. "Don't deny it. I can see it in how they act, the things they say." Her silence was answer enough. She looked down, wringing her hands, but it wasn't guilt I saw. It was frustration. She wasn't sorry. She was caught. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat Alina down in the living room. The air between us was icy, thick with unspoken tension. "This is your last chance to come clean," I said. "Tell me everything, or I'm done." Her defenses crumbled. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she said weakly. "Jake he listens. He understands me in a way you don't." My jaw tightened. "And what about the kids? Did you think about them while you were trashing me behind my back?" "They're just kids," she snapped, her composure slipping. "They don't need to know all the details. I was just trying to explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted. "That their dad is the bad guy? That their mom's the victim? Is that how you justify this?" She stood abruptly, crossing her arms. "You haven't exactly been perfect, Dan. You're always so focused on work, or your investments for the kids, or your pride. Maybe if you'd been more present." "Don't you dare blame me for your choices," I said, my voice cold and cutting. "This isn't about me. This is about you." That night, I slept in the guest room again, my mind racing with everything that had come to light. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the trust she destroyed, not just between us, but between me and my kids. Alina had crossed lines I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I called Christine, my lawyer, and scheduled another meeting. This time, I wasn't looking for options. I was looking for a way out. The decision to file for divorce came with a sense of grim finality. Alina's repeated betrayals, her lies, and the subtle poisoning of our relationship with the kids had left me no choice. By the time I met with Christine again, I wasn't just determined to end our marriage. I was determined to protect what mattered most: Ava and Liam's futures, my relationship with them, and the investments I'd worked so hard to build. Christine wasted no time. "This is going to be a battle," she warned me. "From what you've told me, Alina isn't the type to back down easily, especially when it comes to the kids or the house. But we have a strong case. You've documented her infidelity, her manipulative behavior, and you've got proof of your financial contributions. That will go a long way." She outlined the steps we'd take: filing the petition for divorce, requesting temporary custody of the kids, freezing joint accounts to ensure Alina couldn't drain them, protecting the custodial accounts I'd set up for Ava and Liam. I gave her everything I had, bank statements showing years of consistent contributions to the kids' investment accounts, the text between Alina and Jake, and even the photo from the hotel. Christine assured me that while Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, the evidence of Alina's actions could still influence custody and financial decisions. The custody battle was the most brutal part. Ava and Liam were 13, old enough for the court to consider their preferences, and Alina used that to her advantage. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, she ramped up her campaign against me, subtly planting ideas in their heads. "Dad's always so busy," I overheard Ava say one evening. "He barely spends time with us." It stung, knowing how much of my work and my sacrifices had been for their benefit. I confronted Alina about it, but she played innocent. "They're teenagers, Dan. They're just expressing how they feel." At the custody hearing, her lawyer painted her as the ideal parent, present, nurturing, and devoted. I was portrayed as distant, work-obsessed, and rigid. Alina even had the audacity to claim that I prioritized investments over spending time with the kids, twisting my efforts to secure their futures into a selfish pursuit. But Christine fought back hard. She presented the text evidence, showing Alina's emotional and physical affair. She highlighted my consistent financial support and involvement in the kids' lives, including the educational accounts I'd built for them. She even brought up how Alina had subtly manipulated the kids against me, arguing that it demonstrated poor judgment and an inability to prioritize their best interests. In the end, the court granted us joint custody but gave me primary decision-making authority regarding the kids' education and finances. It wasn't the clean victory I'd hoped for, but it was enough to ensure that Alina couldn't sabotage their futures. The financial side of the divorce was a war of attrition. Alina's lawyer tried to argue that the custodial accounts I'd set up for the kids should be considered marital assets, claiming that she had a right to half of the funds. Christine shut that down quickly. "Custodial accounts are legally the property of the children," she argued. "Mr. Morrison has been the sole contributor to these accounts, and they are designated specifically for Ava and Liam's education. Mrs. Morrison has no claim to them." It was a small victory, but Alina's lawyer pivoted, focusing on the house. Alina wanted to keep it, arguing that it was for the kids. But Christine countered by showing that I had been the one paying the mortgage and maintaining the property. "If Mrs. Morrison wants to stay in the house, she'll need to buy out Mr. Morrison's share," Christine said firmly. "Otherwise, the house should be sold and the proceeds divided." In the end, we agreed to sell the house. The proceeds were split, but I negotiated to keep a larger share to cover the legal fees I'd incurred fighting for the kids' investments. Alina walked away with less than she'd expected, but she didn't seem to care. Her focus was on making my life as difficult as possible. The hardest part wasn't the court battles or the financial wrangling. It was seeing the strain it put on Ava and Liam. They were caught in the middle, torn between parents who used to be a team. I tried to shield them from the worst of it, but there were nights when Liam would retreat to his room in tears, or Ava would snap at me, parroting something she'd clearly heard from Alina. "You're the reason this family fell apart," Ava shouted one evening, slamming her bedroom door. It broke me. No amount of explaining or reasoning seemed to matter. The kids were angry and confused, and all I could do was hope that, in time, they'd see the truth. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt both relieved and exhausted. I kept primary control of the kids' education accounts, ensuring that their futures were secure. I moved into a smaller house closer to their school, trying to create a new sense of stability. Alina, predictably, tried to undermine me at every turn. Missing pickups, bad-mouthing me to the kids, and complaining about the custody arrangement. But I stayed focused on what mattered, being there for Ava and Liam, showing them that I wasn't the villain Alina wanted them to believe I was. The journey was far from over, but as I stood in my new home, unpacking boxes and setting up their rooms, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was a life I could rebuild, for myself, and for my kids. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. New cheating wife stories tomorrow.